I am God. But this flame is God. This plant is God. This animal is God. You are like, but breath is all of it. And then with peyote, it was like, we are one.
We are God.
We are God. All of us. All of this. Everything. And there is no difference between our pain except for how we experience it. Wow. Yeah, it blew my mind because it's so experienced together by 30 different souls as one. 30 people staring at the same fire underneath the stars in the middle of the night, sitting in the same position for 16 hours. You got to feel this unified feeling like of oneness. I respect it so much because it opened my eyes to, oh, it's not something you just smoke and like, that's it. You know, I feel like I worked for it. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Hello and welcome to the James Xander Trip. In today's episode, we're going to dive into plant medicine, breathwork, finding one's identity, overcoming grief and loss, and diving into the spiritual path. Joining me today is a former NFL athlete, breathwork facilitator, and spiritual explorer, Joe Fauria. Welcome to the show.
I like the spiritual explorer.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the intro.
Is that the part that you resonate with the most at this time?
It just perked my ears up a little bit because I've been introed for a couple podcasts.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that vernacular was used. And I kind of liked it.
Yes.
I'm going to put it in my bio.
Hell yeah. Spiritual explorer. Yeah. I think we're all spiritual explorers on some level. And the plant medicines help us explore even deeper.
Yes.
So I want to start with 2019, Ariana Grande and mushrooms. Tell me what happened on that fateful day.
Oh, man. Well, I had, so fast rewind to 2019. It's my first time going to Coachella. And it's, my last year of my 20s. I'm 29 years old. And I had for the first time ever, friends of mine were taking mushroom chocolates. And that was my first time having a real experience with mushrooms. And I have never enjoyed a concert and just the people, like I'm talking a sea of people, which I look back at it now. I'm like, oh, there's just so many people at Coachella, but I didn't care. I knew people there. I was this big roaming around and bouncing off people with this big hat on and no t-shirt. And it was just like this overwhelming like joy feeling that I'll just never forget. I just enjoyed myself so much. I was so happy. Granted, there was a lot of stimulus, but especially those chocolate mushrooms really opened my mind and then kind of opened the door for exploring. Like, why did my mood change so much, and why do I feel okay after? There's no come down like any hard drug. This felt so good. I want to explore more of this. And it was around the same time that I was introducing myself to, or it found me, breathwork and more meditation and stuff like that. So yeah, Ariana Grande, Coachella, 2019, hit them mushrooms, and I haven't looked back.
What did you feel on that first trip that convinced you or showed you that this was something different than other so-called drugs? Because for me, that is not a drug, right? It's a plant medicine.
Absolutely.
But for so many people around the world who maybe have not tried it, they think of mushrooms and ayahuasca and DMT as these illegal substances that are addictive and so on and so forth. So I'm curious, as a first timer in 2019, what did you experience on that mushroom trip?
Well, I agree with you on that, the whole classification by social and political standards and stuff like that. And to be honest, I was in that group as well. I just considered them that classification as well. It wasn't until my experience where I realized that this was a gift. Like this feeling I had for the very first time, where around that time I was still struggling with my identity and who I was and what my superpowers were and what I could offer the world. And mushrooms kind of just reflected the joy I was feeling and sharing with others. I'm like, oh, it kind of just broke it down to a very fundamental, foundational level where it didn't matter who I was or if I had VIP or any of those things. It was just connection and how it felt. And also just I'll never forget how breathing felt so good. And that I'm so happy for like that moment, because before then I just didn't really ever see myself going down that road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you say breathing felt so good, what do you mean by that?
Just the sensitivity of an awareness and connection and consciousness of just a simple, and then you can't help but exhale with a smile.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels so good. And mushrooms gave that to me.
Yeah.
Little mushroom chocolates.
And you mentioned that connection aspect.
Yeah.
Is that something you were lacking at the time? The intimacy with others, or connection to others, or connection to yourself?
Around that time, yes. Late 2018, early 2019 was me trying new things, not really sure. Like when people would ask me what I was doing with my life after football, I'd be like, I'm trying this, I'm trying that. I had no set career path. I was working in a kitchen. I was going on, business meetings, and like my friends who own businesses, they would put me through like interview process to work with their company and stuff like that, putting on a suit and everything. I got to try different things, and I even got into acting, improv, stand-up, started activating different parts of my brain that way as well. So all this shift was all it was like an amalgamation of different things happening at once. It was like, okay, creative side of my brain. Oh, okay, mushrooms. Oh, okay, breath work. Oh, okay, I'm finally putting myself out there and taking massive risks of like who I am without football. And that all happened around the same time. So I'm not surprised that when I was particularly, maybe I didn't know I was ready, but that was when I was ready. And it happened gradually, slowly at a time, but it didn't come without work. And that was, with these mushrooms and psychedelics and stuff like that, always been very careful with the element of reliance. I've danced with that before, with things that didn't come from the ground and manufactured, if you will. And there was a reliance with that. And not saying that those are the same thing, because those were drugs, and these things are, sacraments, they're blessings, they're gifts from the earth, or maybe aliens, I don't know. Right?
That could be cool. We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that. But I was very careful with not relying upon it. And I then got more comfortable with the work element that came with other things that reminded me of the feeling of mushrooms, which was breath work. Mm-hmm. And that sensation of like, oh, I can do this on my own. And then there was the integration element I understood more of, not after the Coachella bit, but trying it a couple times thereafter, where it wasn't like, I'm going to take these every week. I'm going to do the microdose right away. Like I was so careful, and I respected them so much because of how they made me feel. I never wanted that relationship with them to ever go away, because I heard stories about if you take them too much, you don't have the same effect and you build a tolerance. But the relationship I've had with all of these things over the last, since now 4 years, is now I've built a sensitivity to them, which is the opposite. And it's like, it's not, you build a tolerance like an alcohol or an opioid. You build a tolerance and you take more and more and more and more and more. My relationship with them, with respect and love, it's gotten to a point where I'm super sensitive if I take a little bit, to the point where there was a couple weeks in time, a couple years ago, where I did take, for my first time ever, microdose, like just a quarter of a gram every other day for like 2 or 3 weeks. And it got to a point where the days that I had not taken them, I didn't know. I couldn't remember, because I felt like that on the days off as well.
Yes.
So then I came to this conclusion that I am the mushroom.
I love what you said about building the sensitivity, and also building a relationship with the plant, building a sense of trust, knowing that it will take you where you most need to go. Mm-hmm. It'll show you what you most need to know.
Yeah.
I want to jump back to, because you mentioned this was during the time where you were trying to figure out what to do after your NFL career.
Yeah.
And that was a difficult time for you, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was difficult. I describe it as a relationship, like one of the longest ones I've had.
Because you loved the sport so much.
Loved it so much, and I gave her everything. Gave her my time,
blood, sweat, and
tears. It was a commitment, and once that relationship was over, that was what 20 plus years of my life with this one relationship with one sport, and
one injury that ends a 20-year relationship.
So then it just gets that relationship gets severed, and she goes on, finds new partners, because it's endless. It's a revolving door of, college athletes trying to come into the league, and there's always something new, better, more healthy, cheaper option. But so my relationship with her was, after the injury was over, and after that, it was just difficult to grasp who I was without it. Some people find their thing without it sooner. Everyone's timetable is different, and mine was I dragged it out because I kept hanging on, kept trying to fight my way back in, fight for her love again. And
it's also the grieving process.
Yeah,
it's like when you lose anything in life. I mean, people think of grieving as something you do just when you lose a person, but it's also for a career. It's also for losing money, losing friends, losing anything that was super important to you in life. And there's that time period where you just need to really process the emotion. Mm-hmm. And perhaps at the time when it first happened, you didn't want to go into the grief, right? You wanted to hold out hope.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that loss eventually when you did go through the grief?
The grieving process was long and arduous. It was difficult, but
when only a few people in the world would know how it is to be in your position.
Bravo, James. That's exactly the resonance that I was missing. I had no one to really have any sort of find any parallel. I was trying to find parallels with people and finding a resonance with people that have no idea that commitment level to get to that mountaintop. It's for an elite few, so only the elite few experience it. And they do have NFLPA. They do have systems in place for basically the rehabilitation back into life. It just wasn't calling to me. Do
you know what kind of services they offer?
They do group workouts. They offer things. They do a good job, but it's not that it's not readily available. It just didn't feel right. I wanted to disassociate from the NFL totally, completely.
Like a proper breakup.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I was also dealing with a severe gut-wrenching feeling of failure for so long, because I thought that it was going to be so and so many years, or Super Bowls, Pro Bowls. I had all these ideas in my head because it started so well, but then boom, over in one night, in one instant. And with that, I carried around this failure where when I didn't put myself out there, I didn't know the magnitude of what even reaching the NFL for one day meant to people. And I actually did well for the time frame that I did have. And owning that and stop focusing on who I was not and focusing on who I was. And that happened with these modalities that we're talking about, and these sacraments that we're talking about, these gifts that we're talking about.
Breathwork, plant medicine.
Yes.
And I think the failure piece is something everyone goes through in various areas of life. And you always think, if only I'd done something different, right? If only I had not done the volleyball game that led to the injury, or if only I'd done this or that. Not realizing that there was so much momentum and forces at play that led you to that moment, that it actually could not have gone any other way.
Right.
But it takes sometimes years to realize that.
Yeah.
So I wonder, was there a process of forgiving yourself for what you thought you did wrong, even though you were doing the best that you knew in the moment?
I mean, Yeah, of course. I mean, that helps me sleep at night, that notion, but it's a hard pill to swallow, and it takes an amount of awareness and a perspective shift, and also just self-love. And my self-love was pushing my body on the field. My self-love was being in the gym, getting stronger. I had no practice of self-love otherwise. I mean, I went to yoga sometimes, and that kind of opened the door a little bit a long time ago, but
your self-love was on the field.
Yeah, my self-love was on the field. So after that, it was me, the self-love aspect came with just a hard-fought battle of hitting rock bottom, and then getting out of a love of 6 years, moving from New York to LA, living with my grandparents, having zero to no money, and sold my car, sometimes was struggling to feed my dog, those kind of things. And what could I do besides put a meditation pad next to my bed and just sit still for a little bit? I got 100 days in a row plus on Headspace, and I was like, okay, this is working. I'm not as irritable anymore. I'm not thinking about all the failures I have all day. And this mindfulness practice started to take shape. And there came a time with my desire for, something of substance, not taking a substance, but something of substance, something to really grasp on, something to like solidify my feelings about this new space that I'm jumping into, or just kind of on the side doing just for my mental health. Then breathwork came. So breathwork came in the shape of, you have something of quantifiable. Like, I have these experiences. You cannot tell me any different. I'm seeing colors. Like, my body is shivering and moving. Like, I have my heart rate is going so low and dropping in such a deep state just because of the little breath movement with my belly and my chest. And then of course Wim Hof yelling at me on YouTube videos and stuff like that got me to a point where I'm like, I just knew that there was more, and I loved that I was experiencing it on my own, like with my own supply, and not relying upon any sort of other medicines and
nothing
stuff like
external.
That. Yeah, because I've also, I had a struggle with, painkillers with playing football. Mm-hmm. I ate them like Tic Tacs. Mm. And
is that common in the NFL?
Yeah. I mean, now that they can smoke weed a little bit, it's a little better. Back when I was playing, you still couldn't really. There was ways around it, but it was super easy to say, this hurts, can I have pain medicine? And I had easy access. So it never got to the point where it was just a dependence, but it would just be easy. I would take them without water, put them in the mouth, boom, good to go. If I was in pain.
Later on, when you were going through your dark night of the soul, did you ever get to a moment where you wanted to reach for those painkillers?
No. My relationship with that wasn't that strong. I actually didn't like how I felt with them. I didn't like that I was like laughing and crying at the same time. It was this weird feeling. I also didn't like how it stopped you from pooping.
Oh, I see. That's not cool. Yeah.
So it wasn't my cup of tea, but nevertheless, it was just something of that was part of the culture that I didn't I didn't want to bleed into my next life. And so that's why I was very careful with my relationship with all the things that we're talking about today. So breath work was a way of, okay, this is just my breath. I could do this 24/7. It's free. And I'm feeling so good after. Like literally the day I can attribute days that aren't so good. There's no bad days, just different levels of good. But the days that are not so good were days that I didn't do breath work. And there was a direct correlation. I'm like, when I do breath work, I'm in a better mood. I'm firing on all cylinders. If I start my day like this, everything else falls into place.
Yeah, I tried breath work for the first time only 6 months ago, and it blew my mind. My friend sent me this video from Brian Kelly, and it was like a 60, 70 minute guided audio. and I put it on. I was going through I actually put it off for a little while because I was like, I'll check this out later. Was going through a difficult time. Was like, okay, I'll try this tool. And I'm doing the work. I'm breathing in, and like nothing's really happening for maybe 70% of it. And then it just kicks in, and I'm going into basically a mini DMT trip. And I recognized the feeling because I had done DMT, and I was like, wow, just this from breath? Like, it's insane. And then you feel so reset after, so good. Like someone went in and retuned you, recalibrated you. And the downloads also, something I usually only get from psychedelics. I was getting all these downloads and insights about my life on breathwork. And I'm sure you experience the same way.
Yes. Yes.
What kind of insights did you start getting from breathwork when you first ventured into that arena?
Just a sense of something more. Some people call it the supernatural. Some people call it heaven or nirvana or
the divine,
other dimensions, whatever it is. Like, I have an unwavering confidence that there is something more because of the practice, and it feels good. I mean, there's also, make no mistake, there are also times when your body can tense up, and that's part of the healing. If you don't meet it with resistance, it could really be a very healing, realigning type of practice. And it's something that I just, it makes me smile because I say it saved my life. It was one of those things where I was like, if I didn't have breath work, I'd probably be still going through the grieving process, still not okay with my life away from football. Breathwork was a catalyst for that.
What do you think was the biggest gift or transformation that breathwork gave to you?
There's something beautiful that happens in the gap, in that break between an inhale and an exhale, or a breath hold. There's an element of peace and quiet. If your eyes are closed, it's darkness, but also I've had my eyes closed and seen probably more colors than I see when my eyes are open. So, with that, it was, you call it downloads, or I say traveling beyond space and time and reliving certain scenarios or memories, or accessing things that are deep in the subconscious that need your attention, that have been, maybe previously buried or latent or inaccessible. And breathwork opens those roads, and it's one of those things where it just opens the door for possibility. And for me, it was just a no-brainer. The magic that I could create myself with my own breath, and it's never let me down. Because if I know now, when I had like a certain limp or I was irritable, it was just energy that was stuck energy. Because what is emotion besides energy and motion? And I was not okay with my unresolved anger. I used to get my anger out on the field, and when I had anger in the real world, I didn't know where to put it. So sometimes my breath work would result into a rageful scream, where when I was early on still living with my family, I felt super bad for like waking up my grandparents or something like that, with like a really loud primal scream. And that, I know now, when I see people like have a hunchback or like have a limp or are like not so keen with eye contact, it's because they have energy that's just stuck and stagnant. And this breath work is like a spiritual plunger to like get everything moving. And it just feels so good. You can't just like you don't leave the gym saying, "Oh, I regret that workout." Like I never do a breathwork session. Oh, I say I regret that. I always feel better. So why not do something as much as possible? This tool that I have access to and I'm practicing it with. Why wouldn't I use it if every time I use it, I feel better after? It's just common sense.
How often do you do it? And what is like, how many minutes do you do a day or a week? I'm curious what your current practice is.
Yeah.
And also, what would you recommend for someone who's never done it? Where should they start?
With 1 minute.
1 minute.
Yeah. Just do it. Just do a few breaths. Just 10 breaths. Like just start. I remember when I first started meditating, I was like, oh, how am I going to sit still for 15 minutes? Then I just started doing the 5-minute sessions and then I just started growing to 10 minutes, or I would be in for 5 minutes guided and then stay for 10, 15 more minutes. I'm like, oh, I like this. So then I started growing with that. And if I say, hey, join a breathwork session for 2 hours, it might be a little daunting. So with that, I mean, a personal practice, I think it just start slow and, not that long, but also the more expansive. And if you want that psychedelic hit,
the kick,
and they're really reshuffle and do the spring cleaning, a long session is more favorable. But in my experience with my own personal practice, it was, committing maybe 3 or 4 rounds of Wim Hof on YouTube when I first started out. And then when I had gotten certified in 2020, I just was trying all these different types of pranayama, finding stuff on YouTube, going to breathwork classes, paying for Zoom classes online. And then I just wanted to learn as much as possible because it was so fascinating to me. But for any sort of suggestion starting out, just a cut. There's so many different ones out there. My own practice was starting with Wim Hof, expanding on it with different types of pranayama, and it would range anywhere from a quick round of 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of Tumo breath work, getting activated really soon, or laying down for 30, 45 minutes or an hour. It was all over the place. It got to a point where it was, not based on the mood, but just what I had access to that day, what my time frame was that day, but usually in the morning, no matter what, first thing in the morning, and then most times before I go to bed, and sometimes before I got in the parking lot before an interview or a date, or I just started relying on this thing and started using it more. It was a tool. So sometimes I would do breath work 6, 7 times a day, but most often I'm doing it once or twice a day. And it's just all over the place. There's no set time. I'm doing this for 15, 20, 30 minutes or an hour and a half. Sometimes in class, that's a thing. But with my own practice, it's just what I can access that day, or how do I feel that day, or what have you. And now, very similarly to the relationship with mushrooms, now breath work, it might have taken longer for me to access the activation part of the breath work and the pranayama. And now with that practice that I have now over the last few years, I've now built a sensitivity to it where it doesn't take me an hour and a half or an hour to really have maybe a mini DMT experience.
To activate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to talk about another kind of activation. When you did Bufo.
Ooh.
Yeah. One day after your father passed away.
Yeah.
How was that trip? That seems intense to do it right after.
Well, not only was it right after my father passed away, it was also the day I ever heard of it.
Yeah.
The same day.
You were not planning to do it.
No, I thought this retreat that I was going to in Mexico was just yoga and breath work and going to the beach and doing some stuff here and there. I had no idea they had this, because it's not one of those things that they necessarily are so keen to market or make available on their website or whatever. But when I get there, they're like, "Hey, we also have this thing called Bufo." And I'm like, "What's Bufo?" So it was the day after my father had passed away. Him and I had a very complicated relationship. I didn't see or speak to him for 25 years. But only 8 months before I tried Bufo for the first time did I reaccess that relationship and meet him for the first time in 25 years. Yeah, intense. So with that, and my mind being opened by breath work and other things, having really taken like a full psychedelic like this, besides mushrooms, my first one was Bufo, and that's apparently one of the stronger ones.
It's maybe the strongest one.
It is the strongest. And
Bufo Alvarius, the toad medicine,
yes,
5-MeO, DMT.
Yes.
I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's one. There's no negotiation.
No,
you take a rocket ship past. You might recognize maybe a couple things before the rocket ship takes full steam. Maybe it's like an imperceptible 0.5 seconds less of
the gap between where you fully go.
Before the ego is like, I can't go with you, and you let it go and you surrender and you go full steam ahead. And you do experience like this element of blackness and death and, you know, nothingness, but also everythingness at the same time. I think I had never watched the video, but I had 12 hippies holding space for me under the stars in Sayulita, Mexico. And they told me I said thank you like 40 times. And
that reminds me of my DMT trip. Not 5-MeO, but a full-on DMT breakthrough.
Very grateful.
So much gratitude.
And
it felt like dying, if dying was the most beautiful thing in the world.
That's what it was. After that experience, I realized that, one, I did experience death. I'm careful with the whole, I experienced an ego death type of thing, but
you experienced perception without body, right? Your pure consciousness.
And I was okay with it. Because my relationship with it is that it's not the end. Yeah, it's not. It's fun to say.
There is no
end. There is no.
It's
end.
Infinity.
Yeah. It's a beautiful medicine. And since then I've taken it twice. Like again, I don't want to rely upon it. I did it once, April 2021, and then October of last year. And I've actually since then worked with it personally, where I'm holding space for people that are doing it. Not serving by any means. I'm not a shaman yet. I'm just kidding.
You're on the way.
The shamanic path is I respect it so much that I don't want to like ever, disrespect it by saying that I am one, because I'm not. But I am adjacent and I'm near it, and I've seen what shamans do, and I know that it's very, very tricky, not tricky, but very careful and blessed thing that should be treated with respect. But nevertheless, learning with a shaman, one in Mexico and then one in Malibu, where they serve the medicine, and it's beautiful to be on the other side of it, and can feel the energy when you've seen it work so many times. And also, my favorite part about it is that with the ceremonies that I've been a part of, my favorite part is that reaction has happened. Very similar reactions that happen in those ceremonies also happen in breathwork. So I was approaching that, helping and holding space and learning from the shaman, not necessarily for wanting to ever serve medicine, because that won't be an avenue I'll ever go down, because it's very dangerous, if traveling with it and that type of thing. So just very careful, just being next to it and close to it, because I love it so much and I know the power it has. But also like holding space for those kind of things are so similar to breathwork. The classes I guide gotten to a point where built this unwavering competence with sharing it. Unconscious competence with sharing it, and gotten to a point where in my own practice, I know what type of techniques and rhythms can get me there, and the amount. When I share those type of techniques, if not every class, depending how much I push or how many rounds we go or how the container is set, it's usually pretty safe by me. there's a DMT trip in every other one of my classes.
Yeah. And holding space in the 5-MeO ceremonies helps you hold space in your breath work.
So many similarities. Like sometimes the eyes are open, but they're not seeing anything. They're not breathing for a little bit. They're having this quote unquote near-death experience. I love it so much that we have the ability to access it through nature with the toad and stuff like that. But I think it's even more beautiful to be able to access it on your own. And I think that only because I only did these medicines because I could access it on my own. And I realized, okay, it's not abuse if I can do it myself. I'm just, instead of just knocking on the door or peeking through, this other medicine can just open it wide open for 15 minutes. I'm in. I would love to see that. But only because I could knock on the door and see through a little bit with my own breath.
That first ceremony where you said thank you 40 times, what do you think you were most grateful for? Do you remember the images or the feelings that were coming up for you?
Images, not so much, because it's that like a death.
It's wild.
Blackness. But I guess it was just one, that was my first time even hearing the hippie term of holding space. Didn't know what that was. People kept saying, "Oh, I'm so excited to hold space for you." I'm like, "What does that mean? You're gonna hold my hand? You're gonna rub my head?"
They're holding space, bro.
Yeah, that opened my eyes to how important that is, and that's just like the same thing with like a religious church or Catholic church when they're putting their hands up and sending blessings and good vibes.
It's the intention, right?
It's the intention.
A group of people coming together with a shared intention,
right?
In a safe environment,
right? And
then magic happens,
right? Everyone's frequency and vibrations are high, and elevating one another and magnifying one another. Where this vortex is created, I just felt safe. I felt seen, and it was just so beautiful. There was just so much bliss and beauty and connection with the 12 people that I had only met the day before. Just so I could feel their joy too. And then, some downloads came in about my family, less about my father, which I'm not surprised, but more of my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother. Some ancestors came through, but then I just felt like this, like very like hugging of my like younger self energy as well, and just an element of like I am fulfilled, it's up to me type of thing. And I always am, because I'm breathing and I'm still here. Everything else is just fluff. And it's just so empowering. And like I said, to know that there's more.
Yeah.
To feel and know that there's more.
And that second ceremony, how was it different or similar to the first one?
Well, it was a year later, and by that time, I was really deep in breath work, but it was a year after my mother had passed, because she had only passed away a month after my father. So with that, it was still some kind of latent, I haven't done a ceremony since a year ago. I haven't really dived deep in it. So it got to a point where that last October when I did it, it was very intentional. I was praying, the days before. I was preparing a certain way. And I was letting things in, but also letting them go. I was allowing things into my space. I was listening to certain music. I had a purpose and intention behind it, rather than be like, yeah, sure, why not?
Was it to connect with your mother?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Yes, it was. And I absolutely did.
Wow.
I absolutely did. It was beautiful. It was just this overwhelming sense of oneness. And then I felt like I was being held at the end of it. And it was just, again, another beautiful confirmation. And I'm so careful with like sharing this information.
It's sacred. I understand.
It's so sacred, but also it's like, it's not, I don't want anyone to do this like often. I just don't think that's like, I want it to be experienced, but I think if the whole world experienced it, it would be a better place. But this thing is like spring cleaning, you know?
I honestly, for 5-MeO, I think it's unlikely because after one experience, it's so intense.
Yeah.
You're not likely to repeat it anytime soon.
Right.
It's like when I did ayahuasca for the first time, I was like, that was one ceremony and it gave me enough homework for 3 years. Like I really don't need to, come back the next day to do it. So I feel like there is a built-in mechanism with the stronger plants that almost prevents abuse of them because they will cosmic slap you if you come back too soon.
Right.
Or with the wrong intention.
Exactly.
Whereas like mushrooms, I feel they also have a built-in tolerance mechanism. So even if you wanted to do a deep trip every day, you're not the tolerance is gonna build up. But they're also friendly. They welcome you back. They're like, okay, let's learn. Let's give you more lessons.
Yeah. That second one, I think, will be my last one for a while. Whenever these sacraments, I never really reached for them.
They come to you.
Yes. Like I said, the first time it came to me in a beautiful way. The time last October, it came to me in a beautiful way where a friend of mine had tried it for the first time after I had shared it with him and he had heard enough stories and it's a new enough podcast where he finally found a nice place. And the place that he did it was so magical that I wanted to try it too. It's beautiful. It's beautiful medicine. It's a beautiful medicine.
Why are you smiling? What are you thinking of?
I just when it comes in your field of view in an intentional way, when you're doing the work, you can't help but smile. And I'm thinking about the times that I have been, it's been brought into my attention. Hey, did you want to try this? It's like, wait a minute. I have no reservations because this is the right time.
Yeah.
I didn't Google it. I didn't text a bunch of people for it. I didn't go on Reddit or something like that. Or I didn't search for it. I let it come to me. I thought about it maybe a couple of times. Maybe it came to me in a breathwork or meditation sitting, and I let it go. And just like that, I have done that only a couple times. I've done peyote once, and I still haven't done ayahuasca yet. But I know one day that I will, and when it comes to me in a beautiful way.
You're in for a treat.
Yeah. So I've heard.
It's honestly one of the most beautiful experiences. People love to talk about the purging and the crying and the screaming, but it is honestly one of the most beautiful experiences. If you go in with an open heart and full surrender, because the suffering comes from the resistance.
Right.
It's like the Mother Aya is there working on your blocks. And of course, if we resist, it's going to just take a little longer.
Yeah.
But once you surrender, it's beauty, it's love, it's unity.
And you know these words that you're talking about, like this beautiful articulation that you're talking about, is the same things I say when I guide breath work. If you I mentioned the things that could come up, like the tension, the tingles, the tetany, the tears, all these things that could come up. Very similarly to like the plant medicine, if you reach for them, or like in a bad dream, if you reach for something, it'll just get further and further away. But if you allow it into your space, just even the thought of it or the possibility of it, allow it, okay, and then accept it when it does come, and not be like, ooh, this is a good feeling, don't leave, accept it, hold on to it, and just reach for more and more. It's not going to work. That's also an element of resistance, right? And then when you surrender to it, that feeling of the tension or the energy and motion through a breathwork session, or maybe even getting a little DMT activation as well. If you reach for it, it'll just skate by. It'll just be boom, gone in an instant. And I think that's so important, that element, that special word of surrender, with not only the psychedelic ceremonies, but breath work as well.
And with life.
with life.
Right? Like your NFL career.
Gotta surrender.
It took you a couple of years, but finally you surrendered to what life was inviting you into the next evolution of you.
Right.
But in the beginning, there was resistance because you were, as we all do, trying to control how our life unfolds.
Yep.
What did peyote teach you about yourself?
One, there's a stoic element to it.
It's the grandfather energy.
Yes, grandfather energy. It's masculine, but also has a beautiful feminine touch to it too, with like bathing in flower water with the prayer and stuff like that. And the road boss I had was very respectful and amazing and intelligent and vulnerable, but also strong and disciplined. Usually you can't, there's a lot of rules and elements of like certain guidelines that you have to follow when you're in the teepee. And it was one of those things where if you couldn't walk a certain way, you couldn't walk behind, or you couldn't walk behind people, you had to walk in front of people. Most teepee ceremonies, peyote ceremonies, you're not supposed to leave at all. Our road boss actually let people go pee-pee and go to the bathroom. And the fire element, the fire could not go out at all. So there was a fireman, there was people that had like duties. There was like this like familial community feeling where there was 30 people in a teepee. The fire never stopped. We went for 16 hours. Didn't move. You're supposed to be on your knees in the master position the whole entire time, or yoga rabbit position or something like that, the whole entire time. Thank God he was also a little lenient on that as well, because my knees were about to explode. My lower back was on fire.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So with that, there's a strong element of work with it. And this is a very new medicine. It's only a few hundred years old. It's from Native America, and it's crushed up cactus, and it goes around and you kind of like elevate. You continue, it keeps getting passed around throughout the 16 hours that you're there.
So you're redosing a little more.
Yes. Yes. And you're also singing songs with music and this silver water drum, all blessed. You can't sing without this special like stick that used to be a bow and arrow, but now it's not a bow and arrow anymore. A piece of sage and one of those shakers. So there's a beautiful music element. And if you do have a share or a prayer that you'd like to say, you have to say it while you're rolling the tobacco. And when you're done rolling the tobacco, you're done sharing.
Interesting.
It's just these little nuances and the traditions that you can't help but respect. It was one of those things where I wanted to leave multiple times. I was like, get me the fuck out of here.
Why?
It was difficult to be in one spot in this hot ass teepee.
16 hours.
For 16 hours. When I first thought like, oh, we were going to be done when the sun rose. And I started hearing the chickens and the roosters. And I was like, okay, we're almost done. 8 more hours later, we ended up, but it was beautiful. I looked, when it was over, I wanted to do it again, because I felt so good that I did that work, because I love when it's associated with work. I love when one of these sacraments are associated with something beyond just smoking something or drinking something and then going in your peaceful journey and then coming out of it, getting back in your car and going back to what you do, doing what you do. The peyote ceremony was, this is work. It's also the discipline element. And my favorite part was, not my favorite part, but we talk about surrender to the feeling, right? That's not necessarily the case with the peyote. So there is an element of surrender, but instead of letting your arms flail and wailing and screaming and crying and like whatever your body might want to do in that moment from the cactus, it's more have the healing element by staring at the fire and sitting still. Because that's how the grandfather medicine is supposed to be respected. So I didn't do that. I was grabbing the earth a couple times, but I remember vividly it happened. There was a few bouts or a few times of visits with the medicine where there was this unified feeling. It was undeniable.
A synchronization
by all 30 souls in there. And I had a little difficulty after the fact figuring out which feeling was which. Because, okay, so for example, I do my own practice with breath work. I know when it's my pain. Like I'm in the morning and I have some unresolved stuff from the day before or what have you, or even years ago, and something comes up from my subconscious. I will cry. I will let it out. I will not hold back. I will surrender. Okay. But I know my pain. I'm very well versed with my pain, with what I've gone through in my lifetime, in my experiences, very sure of what is my pain and what is someone else's. And by my relationship with someone else's pain is by holding space for others in ceremonies and also holding space for people by guiding them in breath work. I know what is other people's pain. Okay. I know the feeling of, being in someone's energetical space and holding space for them, and they start crying, and then boom, phew, I start crying. Or I can just feel this. Often when I guide someone to DMT land and they can access and open that door, I'm already on my way to holding space to them, or I'm already next to them already because I can already feel it. Right. And I know that difference.
But in peyote?
So with peyote, it was different. When this unified heart, unified mind, unified trauma, because how do we basically the only difference is how we experience and perceive the same stuff, right? So with that pain and suffering and grief and whatever element of trauma and like all of us experiencing it at once. I'll never forget when I felt this thing that I wanted to surrender to. Boom, the very vocal girl in the corner making a lot of noises. Boom, the fireman making some grunting noises. And then some other people like that, weren't as well versed in the space that we're letting it go. We're surrendering to it. We're making noises or whatever. It all happened at once, and I was I was aware of it, but also letting it go, and then also kind of trying to hold back a little bit too to respect the medicine. But after, when it was over, we had a couple healing circles and talking about the experience and integration, which is my favorite part of any medicine. Is how are we going to integrate it for these next, this time thereafter, right? And the road boss says, "Payo attention." I mentioned this element. I'm like, hey, I do breath work. I do this stuff. I know when it's my pain, and I know when it's someone else's. But in that teepee, I couldn't tell the difference. And the person who had done this ceremony a couple times before just started smiling. I'm like, what's so funny? She's like, that's the point. And I said, oh my God. It reflects upon you that it's all one. It's all one. And that happens with other ceremonies too. Like people come out of Bufo and they're like, I am God. But this flame is God. This plant is God. This animal is God. You are but breath is all of it. And then with peyote, it was like, we are one.
We are God.
We are God. All of us. All of this, everything. And there is no difference between our pain except for how we experience it. Wow. Yeah, it blew my mind because I was built such a good relationship with the difference between mine and someone else's that when it was experienced together by 30 different souls as 30 people staring at the same fire underneath the stars in the middle of the night, sitting in the same position for 16 hours, you got to feel this unified feeling of oneness. And I wish I could find more words because I respect it so much because it opened my eyes to, it's not something you just smoke and that's it. I feel like I worked for it, and it was difficult. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My body was so fucking sore for days after, you know. It felt like I climbed all these mountains in 16 hours. Yeah.
What was the toughest mental challenge?
Not leaving the teepee. It was difficult not leaving the teepee. I promised myself I was going to hold it. I had fasted a little bit. I didn't need to go to the bathroom, go to the restroom. I didn't need to do that at all. I made sure that I wasn't moving my spot. I was like, that was my karma, my cross to bear, my way of respecting the medicine. I was like, I'm not leaving.
Was it the physical pain that was tempting you to?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And then also was an element of the medicine, like, not that it never fully hits you, because it does fully hit you, but you're aware the whole time. You're aware of the fire, how your body feels, and all these type of things. Like, you're aware of you could still, like, you're still in it, but you're still experiencing the medicine as well. Not like going full on death, full on ego death, full on
like a hybrid.
It was like you're in this hybrid state the entire time, where you're still feeling your pain. You're still, like, sweating bullets from the fire, but you're also, like, on this journey up with this beautiful medicine.
Tell me about the journey up.
Yeah.
What is happening in the inner landscape for you? What kind of downloads are you receiving? What kind of challenges are you working through?
First, I was like, get me the fuck out of here. My knees hurt, my lower back hurts,
That'll be the title of this episode.
Yeah. First, I was like, get me out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. I thought this would be over soon. Like, what did I sign myself up for? I got all these intrusive thoughts, which is, the same very thoughts that come into my mind when I'm doing a hard hike or lifting a heavy weight.
So you were used to that to a degree, pushing through the physical discomfort.
I have a good relationship with that. But in that moment, it was repetitive in my head, like, get me out of here. I don't want to be here.
I had the exact same experience the first 2 hours of my ayahuasca trip, or the first 3 hours.
Yeah.
Everything just felt off. The music felt off, the people singing, like, and I was experiencing so much grief that was bubbling up from past traumas. I was like, if this is going to be it for the next 8 to 10 hours, I'm not going to survive tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, like, what have I done? This is going to be the worst trip of my life. But then I stuck with it because I knew from mushroom experience that there's an arc to a trip. And I knew it could not be the same. Like, it would shift in some way.
Yeah.
And it started shifting to more joy, more love, more compassion. And I said, oh, I want to go back to the raw grief. That was interesting. That was deeper and raw, more raw than I'd ever felt it. So in it, get me out. It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
After, oh, wait a second, something important was happening there. I'm curious for you, how was your inner journey? The first step of it, the first few hours, were get me out of here, that type of thing. Then I started appreciating the prayers and the music that were being, because there's no really dull moments the whole time. Someone's sharing, someone's singing. So there's a variety.
Yes.
What kind of things were people sharing? Like
prayer. I have a better relationship with prayer because of this experience.
Wow.
And how it was shared by the road boss, the shaman.
The road boss.
The natives call it what we would call a shaman that serves the medicine, because he's not necessarily serving it, but he's the top level in the teepee. He's the elder in the teepee. And he's making sure everything's going the right way. No one's walking the wrong way. The fire's in the right position. It's still going. He'll tell the water woman to do what she has to do, or he'll allow someone to speak because they kind of ask permission, I guess.
He's overseeing.
He is the road boss. He's overseeing everything. And the way he balanced this grandfather medicine and this masculine energy, his masculinity, by keeping everyone disciplined in the right way, not demeaning anybody, but being direct, but also with love. And he would address everyone as either brother or nephew, and he would address the whole teepee as relatives. And, some of his prayers and his talking about the medicine and the traditions of it, and really diving deep in the history of his tribe, and, how it's very dangerous to travel with medicine or in doing what he's doing. And, why also how everyone in that teepee was different from different backgrounds. That's not allowed usually.
Really?
It's a very, this is our tribe's medicine type of thing. It's a very new way of thinking to create a sense of, this is for everyone. This is universal. This is beyond tribe or what land you're on or what background you come from. This is for everyone. And I loved that he represented that, but also I love that he was praying, but also, being disciplined and logical and, forthright, but also very vulnerable, crying with with half the words that he was saying, but there was just raw pain that was coming out, and truth with integrity, that he was just oozing out this beauty. And I'll never forget it. I'm like, that's a man. Like, I respect him. I'll follow him into battle, but I'll hold him if he's crying, and I would also want to be held by him if I was crying, like that type of thing. And never experienced a level like that of someone in such a short amount of time, or subjectively short, 16 hours amount of time, basically being the pinnacle of masculine energy and manhood.
That is such a fascinating insight, that him being vulnerable in front of all of you made him more masculine in your eyes.
Yes.
How has your journey been with masculinity and your definition of it? Has it evolved from the time you were in the NFL to when you started doing breath work and plant medicine?
Yeah. Well, my best masculine energy type of role model was my grandfather, and he's still kicking and stoic as ever, and listens, but also is full of joy and silly, and but not always the best with. Only recently, but my younger experience was not him always crying or anything like that. I didn't really see that. It's a different time. Now I've seen all levels up until this point, but when I was younger, not so much. But he was a very, very good example, prime example of masculine energy being used the right way. He was authoritative and big and strong, but not like scary. And he worked in homicide and vice and undercover sheriff department, and so he had this presence about him that he's seen some shit, and he can hold it down and be dangerous if he had to be, but probably better for everyone else that he doesn't have to be, type of thing. So I've seen that, but also along my way, my masculinity was associated with lifting heavy things, being as macho as possible with football, getting all the girls, that trickster energy of luring in women and that type of thing. Because I was basically, I was raised by mostly my grandparents, but mostly my mom. So that's two women and one man. And my mom was tapped into her masculine energy, but it was from a female, so it's different. So I got a good balance from my mom, but I wouldn't say that my masculine energy was always toxic. It was necessary. It was just more necessarily like less groomed and less polished, and more not caring of the path of destruction. So somewhat might call that toxicity, but I just call that like growth. Where now my relationship with masculinity is so much better, because I know what I look like. I'm 6'8". I'm 250 pounds. When I walk into a room, people look. When I speak, people listen. So with that, I'm also in the space of healing, and I love the fact that I can heal both men and women. And it's a very tricky thing to create a container for people that you don't know or are strangers or you just met, and have them close their eyes for an hour and a half, and they're just listening to your voice and the music that you curated, and also be able to heal. So with that, I think only now in my life have I actually been able to do that, because if I would have done breath work earlier on, I probably wouldn't have been able to hold space for women or feminine energy as well.
And also, when you were in the NFL, I'm imagining there is a lot of pressure to behave a certain way, to not show any weakness, to not show any vulnerability.
I have that would be the thought, and that might be that is to a certain extent that is the prevailing thought, that there's confirmation in that. I can confirm that. However, I have too many examples of being in the space of a locker room with men that, one, are showering naked together, fighting, going at odds at each other on the football field and competing, and really roughing each other up and gladiator type of stuff. But also I've had men cry on my shoulder because they lost their child in a miscarriage, or a man was one of my teammates whose wife was cheating on him. So there is an element of that rawness in the locker room, which is what I missed the most when football was over, because you really can't get that anywhere else. And at that point in my time, I didn't know you could get that anywhere else. And that was such a special thing, but there was like an earned type of thing where it was this elite club where we all kind of shared a certain similar path. Like, we all played college football, we all did this thing where we got there, and we were like, okay, it's just this unconscious like confirmation from each other that we both went through it to get to where we are. So
we belong in this brotherhood.
Yes, we belong in this brotherhood type of thing. So I have too many examples of masculine energy being used the right way.
That's beautiful.
But at the same time, you have to tap into a certain masculine energy that is just wild and rare and crazy, to like be able to force someone's body to move with like force and aggression, and channel that in a certain way too. You have to access certain corners of masculinity that may not be super okay to access at all times unless you're trying to move somebody on the football field. So accessing those different corners there's nuance, but it's fascinating. But I have too many examples of good men and strong masculine energy in the football realm, and especially in the locker room. And when that was over, it's just hard to. I found it difficult to find that where you can, because that takes like years and years of building, right? And when that's away, like, who else can I share that with?
It seems like you found it in breathwork and plant medicine, in certain ways.
Yeah,
it's the place where you can let down your guard, and you're with 30 other people tripping on peyote, connecting to the same divine source, the same love, the same unity. And the boss is crying in front of you, and it's like you create this container that is sacred, and maybe even deeper than what you experienced in the locker room.
Yes, definitely deeper, and just more expansive, more layers.
So what were the lessons that came up for you in peyote, if you could share anything that's not too personal?
Well, I think we're doing personal today. James, we're doing personal.
That's kind of the James Xander Trip podcast.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. What's the biggest takeaway you said?
What is the insights, that you got?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, that we are all one. It's just our experience is what makes a difference. We all experience things differently, but at the end of the day, it's energy that's classified as grief. It's energy classified as shame, as fear. We all experience these things that we've arranged certain letters to describe and make words for. And how many how much energy and emotion is indescribable. They don't have words for.
Did you connect to anyone or anything on the trip?
Ground.
The ground.
The ground was breathing. The ground was breathing. I put my hands on it and I just felt, I felt this unified heartbeat from Mother Earth.
Wow.
Just this unified, I keep saying oneness. The oneness element comes up a lot in, from my experience in that teepee. And it's probably, definitely one of the main things. And definitely, you go to this place and this teepee, I actually helped put it up, which was great. I even helped take it down, which is great. But after going through the 16 hours, you meet people beforehand, but albeit brief, you kind of get some, I try to do my best by getting everybody's name. Because I'm like, if I'm going to be shoulder to shoulder with these people for the next however many hours, it'd be nice to know their name.
Little do you know, it's all one name.
Yes. So when I remember vividly like all the people that I met before, and then after, everyone just looked like prettier and more beautiful. Like everyone looked like they were glowing.
Granted, it's because you're seeing them with new eyes, right?
Yes, that as well. That is, of course, yes. It wasn't like, by all intents and purposes, everyone was like dirty, sweaty, gross. Like just had gone through hell and then some. But everyone just was like, you could just feel it. Everyone just looked gorgeous, and I'll never forget that. It was beyond just physical features or preconceived notions or whatever. It was just like, wow, you look different, or I'm seeing you differently,
or both,
because
we're both in the presence. We're both tuned into God.
Yeah,
we're both tuned into love. Everyone's heart is open after 16 hours.
Yeah,
I feel the same on ayahuasca.
And then and the most important part is, how do you carry that with you?
Yes. So talk to me about how you carry something like peyote with you to this day.
You can do the peyote, you can do the ayahuasca, you can take the mushrooms, but you can do the breath work too. All these things could be very psychedelic, right? These journeys we're talking about. But if you do not integrate them, this integration element is the most important element. You could smoke the thing, you can drink the soup, you could do the breath, you can eat the cactus or the mushroom. But unless you integrate whatever came up and the feeling that you have, or that you possess, of bliss and joy and oneness, or whatever comes up from these sacraments, if you don't integrate them by connecting with nature, or writing stuff down, being more intentional with your relationships or the food that you eat. Like ever since then, like the food that I eat, my experience with food is so much better now too. Like one, I'm praying over it. I'm blessing it. I'm looking at it. I'm mindful of it. I'm appreciating every morsel. Like that's from the integration. I mean, the love that you feel thereafter, it doesn't have to dissipate from how far you are from taking that medicine. It can not only plateau, you can expand upon that from your own experiences. So I say this a lot with my breathwork classes, like with breathwork and these things that I've tried, only because of integration, sunsets became prettier. Sunrises became more beautiful. The food I tasted was better. Like my relationships are now deeper and more expansive than ever, because of the integration element and respecting the medicine, and really sitting with what just happened in a way that's not just like, okay, back to what I usually do, back to the default mode network, back to playing the same song over and over again, back to going down the same snow slope over and over again. These things we do, they just rearrange and realign and recalibrate and new neural pathways and avenues and streets in our brain. And, when they're primed for the taking to be traveled down, you should travel down them. You should access it more and more and more. Otherwise, they can calcify and harden and the roads could close down again. So then you're just reverting back to the same old dance that you've been doing, the same old song.
It reminds me of what one of my favorite authors, Emmett Fox, he says, change your thinking and keep it changed. Most people can change their thinking, and the plant medicines help you change your thinking. But keeping it changed, that's the integration.
Keep changing.
Yeah. Let's dive into the personal.
Oh, personal shit.
Yes.
Yeah, some tea. Hit me.
What has been some of the lessons that you've learned around love and relationships in your life?
Well, besides saying love is the answer, my intention for this like whole year, one of my New Year's resolutions was to always speak from a place of love. I had this a relationship one time where if we did get in an argument or something like that, she's like, you can raise your voice, you can do it, you can say all the things, but as long as you're talking from a place of love. I'm like, wow, that's deep. As long as I'm doing it from love, it's okay. Not malintent in my heart. Like, I'm doing this, I'm saying this out of love, I'm doing this out of love. So I think love is the best root, it's the best foundation. And I didn't always practice it the right way. Maybe I loved selfishly, or I loved to get something out of somebody or something or whatever. It was just, like I said, not less polished, less not the right mold. But now I experience love, one, with no boundaries. I remember growing up, and you think the white picket fence, get married, have kids, get a dog, there's a certain, style of life that was portrayed to us. And I had to unlearn that. The reason why I think breakups hurt so much is because, like, we're made to think. I remember being taught, like, sure, you should only date people you can potentially see yourself marrying or being with, but also, like, is it so bad that we had this time together and we didn't? Because I remember there being this breakup element having an association with a failure. Like, you tried, but it didn't work, so it was a waste of time. I'm like, no. Like, this love that we're sharing, there is no, one, should make your own rules with love. There should be your own guidelines with the person that you're sharing that love with.
And it could just be for a season.
Yeah. Season or a reason, what do they call it? I call them chapters. I like the chapters that I've had with the love that I've shared, and some chapters are longer than others, but chapters to my story nonetheless. And I love the fact that they've intersected when they did. I think they were all meant for a reason. But yeah, love is the root and foundation, and should be the root and foundation for everything. Every conversation, every bite you eat, everything you do for yourself, all of that. You should navigate through life with a sense of love.
How many times have you been in love?
Huh. Such a little fun thing to talk about, though, like being in love versus loving someone. And I am on one massive, like, different side of the spectrum, is that I believe I fall in love a lot. I can't count how many times I've been in love. I not just am in love with romantic partners of a hetero relationship. It's falling in love with my sister again, with my cousin, with my best friend, with my teammate, or my mentor, or my grandfather, or my dog. Falling in love with a perfect stranger that helped me through the airport when I was lost because I couldn't read Japanese. These type of things. Like, I'm falling in love often. And that doesn't necessarily mean that comes with falling out of love. It's just being so present in that love moment that you just are overcome with it, where I know this would probably perk some ears, whoever listens to this, that, oh, I've only been in love once, or I've never been in love, or I've only been in love a couple times. I've been in love countless times, and I want to continue doing that. Falling in love is one of my favorite things to do. I think that when someone feels that I can see them and they can see me, that opens the door to have that feeling where, oh my God, like talking to you makes me feel this way. Like this must be love. But, oh, you're James Xander. I'm not sexually attracted to you, even though you have beautiful blue eyes and great hair and a sultry voice. But I'm in love with this conversation. I'm in love with this feeling that I'm having talking to you. I'm in love with you. You know, that's a life I think is worth living. I think keeping a low quantity of falling in love isn't something to be proud of.
Yeah.
I feel bad for people that want to, that think that you can only fall in love once in a lifetime, or that, that person for you is like, there's only one of those. I think there's multiple. I'm not talking about polyamory or anything like that. I'm talking about being in love with life. And life is people. Life is food. Life is four-legged friends and animals and insects. Life is trees. Life is breath. I'm in love with my breath. I'm in love with everyone that comes to my classes, especially the ones that get something out of it. And even the ones that don't. I love them. But I'm in love with everyone that walks through my doors and trusts me to yell at them for an hour straight about when to breathe in and breathe out. And I think that's one of my cheat codes to life. One is treat every day like the best day ever, and then fall in love.
You have a tattoo called Best Day Ever.
It's right here. Can you see it?
I love that. There you go. What inspired that?
Oh, man, that's a good story. Thank you for asking. I mean, I tattooed it on my body for a reason. Please ask me about this. Best Day Ever came from around the same time, like this late 2018, early 2019 time, where introduced to mushrooms and meditation and breath work and all these different and creative thinking and all that stuff. Around the same time, I had this friend of mine coming up in the music world. His name was Harry Hudson. His older brother. We've been friends since 7th grade. One of my best, dearest friends. He's a manager to his younger brother, who is this superstar now, in cahoots with the Jaden Smiths and the Kardashians of the world, but also a massive talent of a musician. Along the way, finding his tune and his music vibe, because he did the rap, he did the auto-tune, he tried everything, but like he really found his voice and his sound. But he also got hit with this really, really bad cancer, like around like 20-something years, very young years old, like 21 or something like that. I forget. He is on the brink of death, but he finally beats it. And he's about to release this album that he's been making for 5 years. It took 5 years, not just because of creativity, but because he was fucking dying, 5 years he was making an album, and like a week or two before the album came out, his father dies, my best friend's dad, of which I knew really well. And their relationship with their father was really resonating with my relationship with my mother. Both parents struggled. And want to say it wasn't his time, but the timing of it was right before the album release. And they did get to make a song and put it on the album. And then he did end up going on this tour. So this guy, this friend of mine, this brother of mine, is younger than me, beat cancer, lost his father before one of his biggest days of his life, and he still has his happy, joyful disposition. And he's wearing a red hat and he's singing and holding yellow roses for the crowd. And like, I went to a few of his shows, one in Brooklyn, a couple in LA, on his tour. And I noticed something that he always said. And it sat with me for a while. And it was one of those things where he would be like, this is my favorite crowd. This is the best night ever. This is the best crowd ever. This is my best show ever. And I'm like, you just said that to the last 2 shows, Harry. Like, come on, like but
it's an attitude, yeah.
Right, but I was like, at first I was thinking, oh, does that cheapen the other shows? Like I was mad that when I went to Kanye and Jay-Z's tour and they had broken the record of most encores for their song in Paris, Dudes in Paris, they did like 9 songs in a row for Saturday night, but Sunday night they did like 10 songs in a row. I was like, oh man, does that make the 9-song encore less cool? No. So when he would say, this is my best crowd ever, this is the best day of my life ever, like it didn't cheapen the times he said it beforehand. It just was the most present he could be in saying, this is the best time of my life. So that's why I had mentioned earlier, I'm very careful by saying, oh, I've had a bad day. Sure, we can have some bad moments, but I've never categorized since this realization that he shared with me. I don't have bad days. I literally call them in my head and perceive them as different levels of good days. But I will say, even if I have a flat tire or I lose a loved one, like I'll whisper it to myself. I'll think it in my head. This is the best day ever.
Wow.
I just stubbed my toe. This is the best day ever. Like it's a cheat code. It unlocks, and it unlocks so many different doors. If I think that way now, unconsciously, I still get angry. I still go through shit. I still take punches on the chin, but there won't be a day that I don't look at this and say it to myself. And that's why I got it tattooed on my body, because after hearing Harry Hudson say it to his crowd a number of times, I got to a point where like, wait a minute, I can say that about my own day.
Yeah. And
this was like around 2019. I can say that about my own day. So I started saying it. People ask me, how's your day? I'm like, it's the best day ever. They're like, what did you do? Mind you, it's like 10 a.m. Wow, it's the best day ever. Like, what did you do? I'm like, I woke up this morning and they could tell that I meant it. Sometimes people would meet that, because that's happened a few times. Like, oh, why is it the best day ever? I woke up this morning. Sometimes it's met with a nice like,
they want a justification.
Giggle. Right.
What did you do to be worth of the best day ever, right?
Right.
Whereas yours coming at it from this pure place of, I woke up, I'm alive, the sun is shining.
And it might sound cliche or something, but it literally unlocked so much possibility and expansion for me that not that I preach it, but I'm not shy to tell people like, this is what helped me.
It's an attitude.
It's an attitude. It's an affirmation.
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life. Some people believe, you only live once, that type of thing, the YOLO mindset. But I think you only live once every day. Like you only live day to day.
Ooh.
You have that day to live, that best day ever life.
Yes.
And then you die.
Yeah.
Go into dreamland and you come back and do it again.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I was just listening to someone today and they were saying how to be grateful, but not just grateful on the surface, but grateful that everything you do today is the last time you'll do it this way, in this moment, in this exact configuration. Mm-hmm. And to be grateful for this sunset because it's the last sunset like this person, this conversation, because it'll never happen exactly that way.
Right.
And it reminds me of what you said about you die every day. This is today. This is your one day life.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow a new one begins.
And some people might think that's like kind of a tragic way of thought, but I think it's most beautiful because there's a freedom in it where it's like maximize it type of viewpoint where it's this is what I got now. I think it just really drives home the whole being present in every moment type of feeling.
It requires a certain presence, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think when you were in the midst of your grief and depression a couple years prior, when we live in the past, it's hard to then treat each day with gratitude? Or how do you perceive that?
I perceive it. I'm going to use a water metaphor. I perceive, this is also how I do some of my guided meditations and guided breath work, is approaching a stream of water, stream of thought or a stream of experiences or feelings or emotions or anything. And that's rushing in front of you. You walk to the edge of that stream and it's rushing in front of you. If you anticipate what's coming down the stream, a certain emotion or a feeling or a love, that's anxiety. That anxious feeling of looking up the stream, anticipating what's coming, feeling nervous or reaching for it or wanting it. That's an anxious feeling. And then looking downstream of what has already happened and any sort of loss or grief or, losing my mother or losing football. If I directly sort of stay in that and look down the stream and want those things back or wish they could come back or, live in the moment, not in the moment, but live for what has already happened and want that back so badly or want it to change. That's depression. That's depression to me. And when that rushing water of those nerves or anxious feelings or that loss and grief and fear or what's to come or what's already happened, that makes the waters all messy and white water and just dangerous, right? And then when you sit and just look in front of your feet and just perceive the water as it is, it eventually just gets smooth to the point where you could see your reflection. And it just gets calm and quiet. And that's the present moment. And knowing that every one of those emotions, whether it be anger or love and happiness and joy or sadness and grief, they will all pass. And worrying about them is anxiety, about them coming as anxiety. And then worrying about losing them is depression. So what's the best thing for me is looking at what's right in front of me right now and being present in this moment right now. And then the waters get so calm, you can see your reflection. Then you know your true self in that moment.
That stillness, it's so key. And it served me really well in mushroom trips as well. When something comes up that's painful or there's a resistance, there's a block, to just get still and just let it come through you, around you, feel it, but not get agitated by it.
Yeah.
Not create extra ripples in the water, but allow the pond to get still.
Yeah. Pond. It's a good one. It's another body of water that I don't usually use. But
I often think of it like if you're having a lot of anxiety in your life or a lot of conflict, it's as if you're in the pond and you're splashing around. So not only is the experience stressful for you, but also you're creating extra stress, extra ripples.
Right.
And it reminds me of a quote from Oprah. And she said something like, when you don't know what to do, do nothing. Just do nothing for a little bit. Let the ripples still.
That goes back to what we said earlier about doing the whole thing about surrender.
Yeah, the surrender piece. I think they both tie in really beautifully.
Yeah.
If you were to meet your 18-year-old self and you could give him some advice.
Oh my God.
What would you tell that Joe?
18-year-old Big Joe?
Yes, sir.
Oh my goodness. What I would tell 18, wow, James, jeez. What I would tell 18-year-old Joe, I thought about this a lot, but it's very rarely my 18-year-old self. It's more younger. 18-year-old self is more at the midway point, becoming a man type of coming of age, leaving college, going to college from high school, changing my whole life. Wow. And so much happened in that year too. Wow. What I would tell my younger self is, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the hell out of my life. And when I was 18, so I can't say go enjoy it because I enjoyed it. I think I would tell myself, be more mindful of how people, I would say, be more mindful of your intention versus people's perception. That was a big lesson I learned around that time. And I would just warn myself, not just heed the words to myself that 18-year-old Big Joe should be a little more mindful, or a lot more mindful of my intention behind what I do and how other people's experiences can perceive it wildly differently. And got to the point where, that's a great question. But I would say be careful with the path of destruction you leave behind. Don't be so much like a bull in a china shop, and embrace my introvertedness that I didn't do until later on in my 20s.
You were more of a outgoing, extroverted kid?
I was always extroverted. Hey, look at me type of energy.
Yeah.
Hey, point the camera this way type of energy.
Which is great for confidence building.
Right. And I was confident, but to what extent, to what detriment to my own well-being. I associated my identity with being extroverted and making the right joke at the right time. Hey, like this, hey, look at me energy. Hey, look what I can do type of energy. I mean, I was an only child. I didn't grow up as such, but like technically I was. And I didn't have a father I didn't have a father in my life. So there was certain things where I was like, I wanted to get that attention elsewhere. So I would say maybe just, you don't have to do that, and embrace the come down of emptying your cup for others in order to be seen, or in order to be accepted, or in order to be laughed with or at, or that type of thing. So I would tell myself to embrace being the ambivert that I love to be now, which is I'm extroverted, I can be social, but sometimes I'm going to stay in on Friday. And that might come with age, but I think I still have people that are my age that are still going out and relying upon it. And it's hard to see because I can see it damaging them. But for myself, my relationship with a beer every once in a while is so good. A late night every once in a while is so good, where it used to be like the thing that I looked forward to or relied upon or was part of my existence all the time. My frequency was super high. My relationship with that being those highs from people and being extroverted now have a good balance with my introvertedness, where it's like I'm locking myself in the room, I'm doing breath work for an hour, I'm taking my dog on a long walk without my phone. I'm going to put my phone away for the whole day. I'm not going to look at Instagram. I'm not going to text anybody back. That's okay too. That's okay to like sit and watch Netflix and just smash some cookies and ice cream for a little bit. That's okay too. This is how I'm doing the human experience. Because I do believe that I am not a human having these spiritual experiences with the psychedelics and the breath work and that stuff. I do believe, because of the medicine that I've taken, that I am a spiritual being going through this human experience. And there's no way you can tell me otherwise, because I've knocked on that door a few times.
Mm-hmm. And it's that relationship with yourself. It's when you're spending time alone, you are getting to know yourself deeper.
Right. And being extroverted, you rely upon the high from other people, so you don't reflect upon yourself and you don't work on that. So it becomes a certain reliance on others and emptying your cup for others, but not filling up your own. And I've seen it firsthand, how damaging that can be, and not doing the work for yourself, which would then lend a reliance upon others, which you can't rely upon others all the time. It's good, community's good, but everyone's going through their own shit. Yeah,
there's got to be a core that sustains you, that is your own.
Right. What are you doing behind closed doors?
Yeah. That's the true you.
Right.
That's why, you often hear in personal growth, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So how you are behind closed doors is what molds you and what really shapes you.
Yeah.
And if we were to go back, because you said you did think about this question in the earlier years, if we were to go back to your 5-year-old self or 10-year-old self, what kind of advice would you give him?
Man, I would give my younger self the advice. I mean, it's hard not to mention my mother. We had a great friendship, but when she was damaging herself, I packed on. I didn't understand it, so I would get mad at her, this self-destruction element of her life. And I almost felt a little bit of, it's hard not to feel responsible. Like, what if she didn't have me at such a young age? Would she still be having these issues and these challenges? So I would say to tell myself to handle with care. And I mean, I had a good childhood. It was good. I would tell myself that it's all going to be worth it, because there was times where, you know, I was like, why am I doing this football thing? Why am I trying so hard? You know, making like,
because you started playing when you were
5.
Yeah.
You know,
wow. To tell yourself that it was all going to be worth it. You were going to reach that pinnacle. But
not even just the football. I'm thinking now, all of it, all of the, you know, being a class clown and trying to make the joke, and you know, being a loner all throughout 7th grade, because all of my friends in 7th grade, like, they just didn't like how competitive I was, and I guess I don't know, there was a certain element that I just wasn't pleasant to be around, I guess. Also misunderstanding, and, you know, there other things were played into a factor, but all of it, there was so much struggle, witnessing other people's pain and being around other people's trauma, and thinking like, why, woe is me type of thing. But it's given me this rooted belief that it all happened for a reason, kind of thing. And that's very cliche too, but it'll all be worth it with every struggle that I've gone through. And I know that now more than ever, to the point now where I don't sit and wallow over any trial or trauma that's happened now. I welcome, not that I welcome it, but I let it flow through me. I'm not, I don't get mad about, I used to get mad about getting mad. I used to get angry about getting angry, and it just create this whole snowball effect and just get deeper and deeper and deeper, where now I'm like, okay, I'm angry. It's happening for a little bit, or I'm sad. I'm not going to sit in my room for a whole week. Now it's a shorter visitor, because I accept it and I allow it and I surrender to it. So when it does happen, it flows through me and then it leaves. And then boom, I'm like the, you know, I'll snap out of my anger and sadness quick, where you might think I'm crazy.
But it's like, because you're processing it quicker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I've had a few, I've asked myself this question a lot. Like I said, talking to my younger self, I've had conversations with my younger self before, and I've hugged my younger self before. I remember having a whole meditation breathwork process of asking myself who I was and reflecting upon a mirror, and the mirror that I thought was my face just became younger and younger and younger and younger and younger. And I remember looking at my younger self. It's all going to be okay. It's all going to be worth it. There's a reason why the universe or the powers that be or God made you this big, because I struggled with that too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, was it difficult or challenging to grow up and always being the tallest kid in the class and always being...
Fuck yeah, dude. James, it sucked at some times. I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons. I think there's way more pros than cons. But growing up, especially in a Catholic school where they were kind of privy to, you know, this school I was at, it wasn't boys will be boys. It was like boys were bad kind of thing. And
just all boys are bad.
Yeah. And girls could do no wrong. So it got to the, I mean, I remember very young. I remember like walking into class really young, and I was always the tallest in class, biggest in class. I remember like when I would show up to class, like the teacher would, if I was in a bad mood or if I was like having a bad time at away from school and at home, and things were happening at home that were quite difficult to deal with, and I would come into school in a bad mood, the teacher would some teachers along the way during my growing up would call me out and be like, "Oh, Joe's in one of his moods again," and or ask, just those type of things, where I would be like, little Brittany over here, is
also in a bad mood.
Also in a really bad mood. Has been depressed all week and just been a bitch to everybody. You didn't say anything about her. So and that came with experience. And there was a time when I didn't like when people asked me how tall I was or how the weather was up here, and this is stuff like that. And there was a time in my teens where I didn't like it at all. Like, don't ask me that shit. Like, or be a really close feeling to like wanting to spit on someone and tell them it's raining, like that type of thing. And now it's like,
now you own it.
Now I own it. Where I know that there's a reason why I have this stature, and there's also an element of responsibility of how to use it. Like once you get past like 6'7" or 6'8", you are a part of the smallest minority in the world. Literally the biggest people, smallest minority in the world. There's not a lot of us. Not a lot of giants roaming the earth. So there is an element of responsibility where, what am I going to do? I had to figure it out along the way, but what am I going to do when I do walk into a room? What do I offer? People are already looking at me, and I used to answer that with, "Hey, look what I can do," or "Hey, look at this trick," or this joke, or this whatever, very verbose movement, or whatever, like, or thought, anything. Now I'm so sure of the work that I've done, the experiences that I've had, the stories I could tell, the man I am, the integrity I live with, and the love that I share, that when I do enter a room, I don't need to do a cartwheel anymore. And when people do stare at me, I'm not worried about what they're thinking about me, because I know who I am. And when people are whispering about me, I'm not worried about it. When people are commenting something about my size or how they feel around me or whatever, and that kind of thing, like it doesn't faze me anymore, because I'm in my power. That I know it's a fun thing to say these days, but yes, after the work, after the last few years, like the ignition from what I told you about Ariana Grande in 2019, that sparked my curiosity, and that curiosity over the last, obviously, 33 years, but particularly the last 5 years, has been, the prevailing ignition for my wisdom. And it's not just because I have a beard, but you could feel it in the energy and the stories I tell and the love that I share, that there's an element of wisdom, because I've seen some shit most others haven't. And I have empathy and love for all the things that I haven't felt and that others have. Obviously, maybe even objectively worse. But I still can come from a place of love in my experience, that I've seen enough stuff to be able to hold space for those people, or share with those people, or just listen.
What was the deepest lesson you learned from your mom?
One word that stands out is joy. And that's one of the good things. One of the maybe the bad things was, we're not, and there is no bad or good, there only just is. Power of now. Was to not empty out your cup not empty out your cup for others without filling up filling up your own type of thing. That was one of the faults of my mother, was she was so kind, so giving to others that she forgot about herself. I mean, it's hard not to feel an element of responsibility there too, because she gave to me so much.
But you were her child.
I was her child.
That is not, you should not feel that weight on your shoulders.
Right. And now I know, with my own experience and getting to an age of which, if I was her at her age, I would have an 8-year-old or 9-year-old right now. So that offers a whole new perspective shift. And I would say that would be not emptying your cup out without filling your own up yourself.
And the joy.
And the best part about it was the joy.
She taught you the joy of life, the playfulness.
Yes. Silliness, playfulness, the joy in the little things. And
how would she wake you up?
That's funny. That's good. I'm glad you asked that. My mom would make me up with a boombox on her shoulder, kick down the door. Like, this is like, there were alarm clocks, but I asked my mom the night before, like, hey mom, can you wake me up at a certain time? And like, she
it would be a little knock or something on the door.
You think it'd be a little knock sometimes. And sometimes it would be, but most times it was a entertaining, energetic show, because she was up early for nursing anyway, but for school I'd be waking up early. And also, if she had to go to work earlier than me, waking up for school, I'd want to see her before work. So, hey mom, you can wake me up a little earlier. And she would come in, kick down the door, boombox on her shoulder, and start singing like Sister Act 2 soundtrack, or anything like some intense Casey, what was it, BB and CC Winans, like really old school R&B, and we would start jumping on the bed, and that's how my mom woke me up. So she instilled joy in my life, and this joyful disposition that I have is definitely from her, and I'll never forget it. And I think I carry the best parts of her through me. So even like, it's hard to come to grips with the fact that my future children will never meet her.
Yeah.
But I do find there's a grace element of knowing that all the best pieces are through me, and I'll be able to tell stories of her.
She lives on in you.
Yeah. Yeah.
When she passed away, like, how difficult was that to process?
I don't want to say it was easy, but because of the work I had done up until that point, it was quite simple. One, that there is more. Two, showing immense gratitude and gratefulness for the time that I did have, because I couldn't change it. If I didn't have these modalities to rely upon, I might have not accepted it as soon as I did.
Because you had done your Bufo experience.
I'd done the Bufo experience. I had done the breathwork work, and I'll never forget. I said the night before my mom passed, I said to my friends, I was smoking a joint in Malibu, and it was my friends that were there, actually, some hippie homies that were at the place at Mexico with me. We were all hanging out, and I remember saying, if death showed up at my doorstep tomorrow, I'd be okay. And it did come in the form of my grandmother screaming and crying, and then eventually telling me that my mom had passed. And that happened the next day. And so I do attribute the gifts and the sacraments and the ceremonies to helping me be ready for anything. And I do now exist in this life knowing that the worst thing has already happened to me. Sure, I could, have kids and something crazy like, I don't want to put that out there, but that's not possible right now because I don't have any kids. But losing my mother was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. So I've already experienced it. And because of that, I'm on this wounded healer type of journey where I don't want anyone else to ever feel that way. But if they do, I'll be there for them because I've experienced it. And I operate through this life knowing that not much else can really, there are things that can get to me, but nothing else can take me down as far as that took me down. As much as I hurt with that happening to me. And now I know that I can now, because of that happening, because the worst has happened, I can operate knowing that I'm capable of coming out of it alive and okay with whatever's thrown at me. Because I've already gone through the worst. And I came out okay.
For someone listening who might be grieving the loss of someone they love, is there any advice or words of support you can offer them?
One, I'm sorry it happened. But two, the longer we are here, the more it happens. And also, my favorite thing to say is that the more it hurts, shouldn't be sad about it, but the more it hurts is a reflection of the amount of love that was shared. So that hurt, similar to falling in love with the pain of the hike or the pain of the peyote or the pain of lifting the heavy weights or the pain of hitting someone from across from you in a football field, like falling in love with that feeling. I said falling in love with that feeling is very similar to the feeling of knowing that you can come out of it okay. Yeah.
Joe, it's been such an immense pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, for being open, for being vulnerable. There's just 2 questions I have left.
Okay.
One is, what is your dream for the planet?
That everyone does psychedelics.
Me too, brother. Me too.
Oh, man, if everyone does it, dude. James, if everyone did this stuff that we're talking about, at least one of them, like a proper journey or proper ceremony of any of them, the world would be a better place. If literally 8 million people did it right now, there would be a massive shift. It would be this whole place, a whole planet would look like Atlantis in the fables, in the fairy tales, or whatever. Maybe it was real, but that this place would be immaculate, an oasis, if we all just did that. So that's my wish. That's my wish for the world.
Same, brother.
Yeah.
This is why the 1 billion humans mission.
Yes.
Let's get 1 billion people to take mushrooms on the same day.
James, I would like to be one of those 1 billion.
Please.
Let me know when we're doing it.
1billionhumans.com.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And I think, of course, there needs to be integration. The world doesn't suddenly become an oasis overnight, but just people being connected to the divine, being connected to their heart, to their soul, to the plant medicine, that alone just starts the work. It starts the real work.
Yeah.
Because until that happens, whether it's through breathwork or plant medicine or another modality, then you're just playing in the play box with shiny toys.
Yeah.
And it's when you connect with your soul and what your higher self is here to do, that's where the real work begins.
Yes, sir. What's the second question?
The second question is, what is a piece of advice you would like to leave the listener with on how they can lead a more epic life?
Epic life. I will say that the word advice is tricky to me. I one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten was to never listen to anyone's advice.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, you're making your own decision, right? It's nice to get some external, voice of different voices in your head about what perspective they come from. But at the end of the day, you're making your own decision. So
you remind me of one of my friends, Steve. He wrote an article called "Most Advice is Useless."
Yeah, right. And like if on a rare occasion someone will offer me advice, I'll stop them in their tracks and be like, I don't want your advice. I'll stop them like, one, let me just stop you right there. I don't want your advice, but I would love your experience. Or if you can find any parallel with your own experience, or even then.
Because that's all we have is our experience, our story.
Right.
And what others can glean from it is up to them and whether they want to or not.
Right. So with that, my advice would be dialing you back. It wouldn't be advice. I'm not here to offer anyone advice. I'm here to just lend my experience. Here, take it or leave it. I'm lending it. I'm speaking it out into existence. This is what I went through. It may mash with what's going on with you. That's up to you to determine. But with my active listening, it has sparked this life experience from my Rolodex, my subconscious, or what I can access right now. So for an epic life, I would say go live, go take chances. I'm at a very fortunate place in my life where I can afford to travel the world and work from wherever I'm at. And, not everyone has that, but at the same time, it's possible for everybody. And different strokes for different folks and different parts of your life can change that type of thing. But to live more epic, be as mindful as possible, love as hard as you can, and let it rip. Yeah, take chances and do weird shit and see what's out there. Go see. Yeah.
I love that. Joe, thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Pleasure was mine, dude.
You've been listening to the James Xander Trip with Joe Fauria. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this episode, do me a favor and share this epic conversation with one friend. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and at jamesxander.com. Feel free to send me a message with your experiences and stories of psychedelics and breathwork. Much love, and we shall see you in the next episode.